The text message arrived while I was still wearing my black funeral suit, dirt from my father's graveside still caked under my fingernails. I gave your dog to a shelter. He shed too much. I stared at the screen, my aunt's sobs echoing in the background of the funeral home. If I weren't already in hell, this would have punched my ticket. My name is Jackson Raynor, and I'd just buried the only family member who ever gave a damn about me. Now my girlfriend Brittany had decided to dispose of Duke, my 3-year-old rescue German shepherd, like yesterday's garbage. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I walked out of the funeral home, leaving my aunt to handle the remaining mourners, and drove straight to the Pine Valley Animal Shelter on the outskirts of town. The building looked like a concrete prison, all gray walls and chain-link fences. Old Man Weller, a volunteer with permanently stained coveralls and a scowl that could strip paint, met me at the front desk. "You hear about the German Shepherd? Big guy, brown and black? That's Duke, my dog. Where is he?" Weller's expression darkened. "Lady who brought him in said he was aggressive, marked him for immediate euthanization. We were going to put him down tomorrow morning." My blood turned to ice water. Aggressive? Duke wouldn't hurt a fly. He's scared of vacuum cleaners. Don't matter what I think. Paperwork says aggressive. That's what we go by. Weller studied me with sharp eyes. "You got proof he's yours?" I pulled out my phone, showing him dozens of photos of Duke and me, plus his registration papers from my wallet. "Here's his vet records, too. Check the address." 20 minutes later, I was walking Duke out of that concrete hellhole, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. He jumped into my truck like nothing had happened, but I could see the confusion in his dark eyes. He didn't understand why his world had been turned upside down. When I got home to our 3-story Victorian on Maple Street, I found Brittany's car gone and a note on the kitchen counter. "At Marcy's. We need to talk when you're ready to be reasonable about this." Reasonable, right. I spent that evening changing the locks on every door. Brittany wasn't on the lease. The house had been my father's, left to me in his will. She'd been living here for 8 months, but legally she was just a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. The next morning I packed all of Brittany's belongings into garbage bags. Her designer clothes, her collection of self-help books, her ring light for making Instagram videos. All of it went into black trash bags that I stacked neatly on the front porch. Then I printed out an eviction notice. In Maine, even guests have some rights, but I was giving her the full 30 days required by law. I taped it to the front door and took a photo of Duke sitting peacefully on the porch next to the bags, posting it to my rarely used social media with the caption, "Home is where the heart is. Duke's heart is here." Brittany showed up 2 hours later with her best friend Marcy in tow. Marcy immediately started filming with her phone. Everything was content for her lifestyle blog. "Jackson, what the hell is this?" Brittany gestured at the bags, her voice hitting that shrill note that used to make Duke hide under the kitchen table. "Your stuff, and your eviction notice. You've got 30 days to find somewhere else to live." "You can't just kick me out. I live here." "No, you don't. Check the lease. Check the deed. Your name isn't on either one." I kept my voice calm, which I knew would infuriate her more than yelling. Mrs. Dorrance, my 70-year-old neighbor, appeared on her porch with a cup of coffee. She'd never liked Brittany, especially after Brittany had complained about Mrs. Dorrance's wind chimes being too noisy for her morning yoga videos. "Everything all right, Jackson?" Mrs. Dorrance called over. "Just fine, Mrs. D. Just explaining property law to some folks." Brittany's face flushed red. "This is about that stupid dog, isn't it? I'm allergic, Jackson. I was doing what was best for both of us." "Funny thing about allergies," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've got screenshots of your Instagram posts from last month. You know, the ones where you're cuddling with golden retrievers at the dog park, talking about how much you love animals. No sneezing, no red eyes, no allergic reactions." Marcy stopped filming. Brittany's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Plus," I continued, Duke's vet records show he's registered as my emotional support animal. What you did was theft of medical equipment under state law. I could press charges if I wanted to." That was a slight exaggeration, but it sounded official enough. Officer Klein, who'd just pulled up to check on the commotion, nodded approvingly from his patrol car. "Ma'am," Klein called out, "I'd suggest you collect your belongings and move along. This is a civil matter, and the gentleman seems to have his paperwork in order." Brittany grabbed 2 of the bags, threw them in her car, and peeled out of the driveway. But not before Marcy got a few more seconds of footage, no doubt already crafting the narrative for social media. I knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, by evening, Marcy had posted a sob story video about toxic masculinity and animal abuse, painting me as a monster who'd thrown a poor woman out on the streets. The comments section was brutal. Dozens of people calling me everything from heartless to psychotic. But I'd learned a few things about social media warfare from watching Brittany craft her online persona. I created a simple response video, sitting on my front porch with Duke beside me, calmly explaining the situation. I showed the shelter paperwork, the fake euthanization order, the screenshots of Brittany's own posts proving she wasn't allergic to dogs. "I'm not asking for sympathy," I said to the camera. "I'm just asking for the truth. Duke is a good dog who almost died because someone decided he was inconvenient. Judge for yourself whether that's right or wrong." The tide turned overnight. Comments started flooding in supporting me, sharing their own stories of beloved pets, condemning Brittany's actions. Several local news outlets picked up the story. Brittany was furious. She called me screaming about ruining her reputation and destroying her brand. I let it go to voicemail. The real confrontation came 3 days later at the Grizzly Paw, the local dive bar where I sometimes grabbed a beer after work. I was there with Eddie, my co-worker from the garage, when Brittany walked in with her new boyfriend, Trevor Donnelly. I should have seen that coming. Trevor was a real estate agent who drove a white BMW and wore cologne that could kill houseplants. He'd been sniffing around Brittany for months, always finding excuses to stop by the house when I wasn't there. They sat at the bar, Trevor's arm around Brittany's shoulders, both of them talking loudly enough for the whole place to hear. "I told her she should have gotten rid of that mutt months ago," Trevor was saying. "Thing was a menace. Probably would have bitten someone eventually." "Jackson was so obsessed with that dog," Brittany replied. "It was like he cared more about the animal than about me. So unhealthy." Eddie looked at me. "You gonna let them talk about Duke like that?" I finished my beer and walked over to their table. "Trevor, Brittany, enjoying your evening?" Trevor puffed up like a peacock. "We don't want any trouble, Jackson." "No trouble at all. Just wanted to thank you both." They looked confused. "See, I was wondering how long you two had been hooking up behind my back. Then I remembered, Trevor, you were the one who suggested Brittany get rid of Duke, weren't you? Back in February when you came by to check on a property value for the neighborhood." The bar had gone quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to pause. "That's when you told her that dogs lower property values, right? Made the whole neighborhood look trashy?" I smiled. "Funny thing is, I recorded that conversation. Had my phone running because I was trying to diagnose a weird engine noise in the driveway. Amazing what you pick up when you're not trying." Trevor's face went white. "You're bluffing." I pulled out my phone and hit play. Trevor's voice filled the bar. "You should get rid of that dog. Brings down the whole neighborhood. Makes you look like white trash, dating a guy who keeps mutts." The bar erupted. Everyone started talking at once, most of it directed at Trevor and Brittany. Someone booed. Someone else threw a peanut. "You recorded me without consent," Trevor shouted. "That's illegal." "Actually, Maine's a one-party consent state," called out Jim, a regular who happened to be a retired lawyer. "Perfectly legal." Trevor grabbed Brittany's hand and headed for the door, but not before turning back to shout, "This isn't over, Raynor." "Yeah, it is," I replied. "It really is." But Trevor was wrong about one thing. It wasn't over. It was just getting started. The next week, I discovered that Trevor and Brittany had filed a harassment complaint against me, claiming I was stalking them and threatening their safety. Officer Klein came by to ask me about it. They're saying you've been driving by Trevor's condo, leaving threatening messages, the whole 9 yards, Klein said, sitting in my kitchen while Duke dozed at his feet. I gotta ask, any truth to that? None. I've been at work or here at home. Eddie can vouch for me, plus I've got receipts from everywhere I've been. Klein nodded. That's what I figured. Their story doesn't add up, but they're making noise about getting a restraining order. Let them try. I've got nothing to hide. But their complaint gave me an idea. If they wanted to play legal games, I could play too. I filed a small claims court case against Brittany for theft of property, specifically the emotional distress and veterinary costs associated with Duke's near euthanization. In Maine, you can claim up to $6,000 in small claims court, and I had documentation for every penny. The hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, I decided to have a little fun. Trevor's BMW was his pride and joy. He washed it every Sunday, parked it in the same spot at his condo complex, and posted photos of it on his social media like it was his firstborn child. So I started leaving dog toys on his windshield. Nothing threatening, nothing illegal, just squeaky toys shaped like bones, always placed carefully so they wouldn't scratch the paint. I'd do it at night, when no one was around, and I always wore gloves. Trevor installed a security camera, so I started leaving the toys on other cars in the parking lot too, making it look random. The whole complex was finding dog toys on their windshields every morning. Then I escalated. I printed up flyers advertising a free dog adoption event at Trevor's address, complete with his phone number. Within hours, animal lovers from across the county were calling him about adopting puppies. Trevor changed his phone number, so I made new flyers with his work number. The harassment complaint they'd filed against me was dismissed due to lack of evidence. My small claims case, however, was moving forward smoothly. The final confrontation happened at the courthouse on the day of our hearing. Brittany showed up with Trevor and a lawyer, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Your Honor, Brittany's lawyer began, my client was acting in good faith, concerned about a dangerous animal. Dangerous? I interrupted, then caught myself. Sorry, Your Honor. Judge Martinez, a stern woman in her 50s, looked at the paperwork. Mr. Raynor, you're representing yourself? Yes, ma'am. I believe the evidence speaks for itself. I presented my case methodically. The shelter paperwork showing Duke had been falsely labeled as aggressive. The vet records proving Duke had never shown violent behavior. The screenshots of Brittany's social media posts proving she wasn't allergic to dogs. The recording of Trevor suggesting she get rid of Duke. Furthermore, Your Honor, I have evidence that this was part of a coordinated effort to force me to give up my emotional support animal so that Ms. Hall could move in with Mr. Donnelly. I played a voicemail Brittany had left on my phone 2 weeks earlier, drunk and angry. You care more about that stupid dog than about us. Trevor says I can move in with him as soon as you get rid of the mutt. We've been planning this for months. The judge's expression didn't change, but I saw her eyebrows rise slightly. Brittany's lawyer tried to object, but the damage was done. The judge ruled in my favor, awarding me the full $6,000 plus court costs. Ms. Hall, Judge Martinez said, what you did was not only legally wrong, it was morally reprehensible. Mr. Raynor, I hope you and Duke have many happy years together. Outside the courthouse, Trevor was waiting by his BMW, which now sported a large dent in the driver's side door. What happened to your car? I asked innocently. Someone keyed it and hit it with a shopping cart, he snarled. I know it was you. I've been in court all morning, plenty of witnesses. I gestured to the courthouse steps, where several people were still milling around. This isn't over, Trevor said for the second time. You know what, Trevor? You're right. It's not over. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. It was a recording app, and it had been running for the past 5 minutes. You just threatened me in front of a courthouse after losing a legal case, while admitting you think I've been vandalizing your property. That's harassment, buddy. And unlike your fake complaint against me, I've got evidence. Trevor's face went through several colors before settling on a sickly green. Now, here's what's going to happen, I continued. You and Brittany are going to leave me alone. You're going to stop filing fake complaints. You're going to stop spreading lies about me and Duke. And in return, I won't press charges for harassment, and I won't send this recording to your real estate broker. I leaned closer. Because I looked up your employment contract, Trevor. It's public record, and it says you can be fired for conduct unbecoming a professional representative. I think threatening people at courthouses probably qualifies. Trevor got in his dented BMW and drove away without another word. Brittany followed in her car, but not before rolling down her window to shout, "You haven't won anything! You're still a loser living alone with a dog." "Yeah," I called back, and I couldn't be happier about it. That evening, I sat on my front porch with Duke, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Mrs. Dorrance came over with a plate of cookies and a congratulations card. "Heard you won your case today," she said. "News travels fast in this town. Faster when it's good news about good people." She scratched Duke behind the ears. "This boy's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," I said, and for the first time in months, I meant it. The $6,000 judgment would cover Duke's vet bills for years. Brittany and Trevor were out of my life for good. The house was quiet and peaceful, just the way Duke and I liked it. My phone buzzed with a text from Eddie. "Saw the news story about your court case. Drinks at Grizzly Paw to celebrate?" I looked at Duke, who was contentedly chewing on a rope toy. "What do you think, boy? Want to go show off to the locals?" Duke barked once, tail wagging. "That's a yes," I told Eddie. As we walked into the Grizzly Paw an hour later, the whole bar erupted in applause. Someone had printed out the news article about the court case and taped it to the wall. Jim, the retired lawyer, bought me a beer. Even the bartender, a gruff ex-Marine named Santos, cracked a smile. "To Jackson and Duke," Santos announced, raising his glass. "Proof that sometimes the good guys actually win." The bar cheered. Duke, wearing his service animal vest, sat proudly at my feet, accepting pets and treats from everyone who stopped by our table. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I found a note that had been slipped under my front door. For a moment, my heart sank. I thought Brittany and Trevor were starting up again. But the note was from a neighbor I barely knew, an elderly woman who lived 3 houses down. "Thank you for fighting for Duke. My husband and I have been watching this whole situation, and we're proud to have neighbors like you. The world needs more people who stand up for those who can't speak for themselves." I folded the note carefully and put it on my nightstand. Duke was already asleep on his bed next to mine, snoring softly. As I turned off the lights, I realized something had fundamentally changed. For months, I'd been living in Brittany's world, trying to make myself smaller to accommodate her demands and complaints. I'd been apologizing for Duke's existence, for my modest lifestyle, for not being the kind of man who drove a BMW and wore expensive cologne. But I wasn't that man, and I didn't want to be. I was Jackson Raynor, mechanic, dog owner, and apparently winner of small claims court cases. I lived in a house my father had left me, in a neighborhood where people looked out for each other, with a dog who loved me unconditionally. That was enough. More than enough. 6 months later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Brittany and Trevor, apparently, had decided to make it official. The invitation was addressed to Jackson and guest, which I thought was either incredibly stupid or incredibly ballsy. I didn't go to the wedding. Instead, Duke and I spent that Saturday at the dog park, where he played with a dozen other dogs, while their owners and I shared stories and laughed at our pets' antics. One of the other dog owners, a woman named Sarah who worked at the local veterinary clinic, mentioned that she'd heard about my court case. "You're kind of famous in the dog community around here," she said, watching Duke play tug-of-war with her golden retriever. "People call you the guy who saved his dog from his crazy girlfriend." I prefer to think of it as the guy who chose his dog over his crazy girlfriend, I replied. Sarah laughed. Even better. We talked for another hour, about dogs and work and life in our small Maine town. When she asked if I'd like to grab coffee sometime, I said yes without hesitation. As Duke and I walked home that evening, I realized that Brittany had been right about one thing. I did care more about my dog than I'd cared about her, but she'd been wrong about everything else. That wasn't a character flaw. That was character. Period. Duke looked up at me as we reached our front porch, tail wagging, tongue hanging out in that goofy grin that had gotten him through 3 years of life and one very close call with death. "What do you think, boy?" I asked him. "Ready for whatever comes next?" Duke barked once and bounded up the front steps, ready for dinner, ready for our evening walk, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. And so was I.